Hello, welcome to my second video in the Laymen, Linguists, and Conlanger series. Just like last time, I'm going to explain the topic simply, and then we'll take a deeper dive into it, and at the end I'll pose some questions that Conlangers should mull over. So let's get on with it. Put simply, negation is saying no, or it's adding not to an affirmative sentence. This can seem like a dumb topic because it's so essential to every sentence we utter. Without negative sentences, there wouldn't be positive sentences. Without positive sentences, we would live in a world of eternal imagination. But because truth requires the opposite, we need negation. It's essential to language because it's essential to living in reality. But that's the philosophy of it, anyway. But if you take a step back, actually forming a negative sentence isn't as simple as it is to form a negative idea. And ESL learners would tell you this process is specifically difficult in English. Broken down to its basic rules, not can only be added after a linking or helping verb. You can say, he may not go, but you can't say he goes not. I have not seen him is possible because have is a helping verb, but I have seen not him isn't possible. So, if the verb phrase contains a form of be, is, am, are, etc., or a helping verb, have, might, can, just add not. But here's where it gets tricky. If a sentence doesn't have be or a helping verb, you have to add one. For the present and past tense, it's do. I go, I do not go. He lives, he does not live. Notice the S of lives moves to does, because the first verb needs to agree with the subject. It comes naturally with native speakers, but this is really a whirlwind for English learners. Also, I haven't used a single contraction like don't or can't in any of these examples because that's a different conversation altogether. For linguists, since we as humans think in positives and not negatives, that is, we think about what is and not what isn't, the default unmarked form of a statement is the positive. That makes negation a marked form. So the question is, how does a language mark negation? Many do this more simply than English. The negative particle, adverb, affix, whatever, can be added and suddenly it's negative. It can come before the verb, like Mandarin and Spanish. It can come after the verb, like German. And it can come before and after, like French. And we can't talk about the different methods of negation without discussing Jespersen's cycle. Jespersen's cycle asserts that there are 3 stages to the development of various negatives. First, a negator precedes the verb. Then it weakens and speakers reiterate or re-emphasize their negative meaning with a post-verb negator, and eventually the first disappears. So in the previous examples, Mandarin and Spanish would be in the first stage of Jespersen's cycle with a preverb negative, French would be in the second stage with negators before and after the verb, and German in the third with nicht at the end. Keep in mind, no language is guaranteed to go through the cycle, and no saying how fast the cycle happens. Spanish, for instance, is still pre-verb marking, just like Latin was. One well-documented and commonly noted example of Jespersen's cycle is French. The negator ne originally stood alone. With its weakening in the pronunciation, speakers started to add an additional word to stress the negative. Many words were used during the transition, but the one that stuck was pas, which means step. It comes from the expression je marche pas. This would be like saying, I'm not walking one step. Eventually, pas grammaticalized to signify negation. Today, the particle ne is nearly always dropped in casual speech, showing how French is on its way to stage 3. English also followed Jespersen's cycles to a point. English had the same preverb ne as French, taken directly from French, actually. Then, in Middle English, the ne was reduced to just a passing nasal, like modern French. We can see the reduction of the preverb negator in many negative pronouns. Not one, none. Not ever, never. And English isn't alone in this phenomenon. So eventually the preverb was dropped, and not was regularized to the postverb position in I say not. This may sound vaguely familiar, because putting not after the verb isn't as old and archaic as we modern English speakers think. It was still pretty common in the 19th century. For the current situation, there's still a lot of discussion about the development of the don't-doesn't construction in English, so I'll leave that for another video. Instead, I think it's important to point out the weakening of our current system. How clearly is don't actually pronounced in casual speech? Think, I don't know, and I don't mind. Is the preverb negator fading already? Is modern English starting Jespersen's stage 2? And just a few thoughts for conlangers. How does your language mark negation? Is it going through yes person cycle? What stage is it in? What did the speakers used to do? What was the impetus to those changes? And don't forget about double negatives. This could be a video all on its own, so I'm just throwing it in here. Does a double negative make a positive? Or are all elements in a sentence required to be negative in any given negative statement? Also, conlangers really need to consider the negative forms of pronouns. Are the positive words used in conjunction with the negative, like French, je n'ai pas pression, je ne travaille jamais? Or are there other words, like English, no one for anyone, never for ever? So here's an idea someone could workshop. What if the negative was the unmarked version? So the natural phrasing is negative, and they have to mark a sentence for positivity. How would this have effect on the world view of the speakers? They sound like pessimists to me. Thanks for watching. Remember to leave a comment about some other topics you'd like me to cover. I'm already working on the next one, and it is a big one. So like, subscribe. Bye.